So, as we've discussed already throughout this module, opportunities to leverage some of your past success within your organization to better help your approach in going after grant proposals and securing that win. Anthony and I would like you to take the moment at this time to reflect on some of the organizational process assets that we've discussed in this module, also known as OPAs, in terms of being sure to understand questions to consider, right? Which OPAs are you currently using that have been effective, as well as any grant performance metrics that you're keeping at bay or keeping within the conversations at your nonprofit amongst your staff. And lastly, we'd like for you to reflect on the aspect of whether or not there are high effort or low reward grants that you need to reconsider. And so, Anthony, I want to bring you in on this aspect as some of our adult learners are reflecting in this moment as it relates to leveraging past success. In your experience, what nonprofits, OPAs, have they been able to leverage?
Yeah, I think leveraging past success, like keeping that good repository of grants you've submitted, it's a great way to kind of see what you applied for, what worked well with funders, what might get left on the chopping block the next time around. And I think overall seeing the trajectory of your agency, it's almost like seeing your strategic plan where you have this 5-year plan, you have these projections, and you can see, especially when you couple these grant applications with the subsequent reports, if funders ask for it, like, what is an accurate output that you can project. So, it's always a little aspirational. We're going to talk about logic models and how you want to project, but when you actually get down to the numbers, that might refine. So let's say you're projecting distributing 100,000 pounds of food, but when you take a look at the last few years, that baseline's closer to 85,000. I would use that to influence your future grant writing, making sure you're being accurate. You never want to oversell because eventually grant funders are going to just see you inflating numbers and start to feel maybe not dishonesty, but just feel like you might be fluffing that up a little bit. Additionally, we talked about that relationship with funders as well, where you either win a grant or you have a chance to learn, and especially with the unsuccessful grants, reaching out to funders and seeing where your application fell short. This will give you a lot of great context to think about how you improve applications future forward. And with federal applications, there is a peer review process. So anytime one of my clients isn't successful for a federal grant, I always tell them to reach out to the entity and ask for those notes from the reviewers. They should give detailed notes on what was good about your application, what was neutral, and what needed improvement. Those are always really great tips, especially if you're applying for highly technical opportunities like a federal grant proposal.
Absolutely. And like we discussed in this module thus far, it's so important to document some of that feedback because it's one thing to get the feedback from the funder, but how are you able to track that and then able to bring it back for reconsideration? Because I love how you framed it earlier in terms of even if you don't win the grant, it's still an opportunity to learn. Mm-hmm. And I think we all can, take a page from that book in terms of if there is a grant that you are looking to go after, using OPAs is an opportunity for you to be able to reconsider some of those other grants. And so one of the questions that we're having some of our nonprofits reflect on right now is this notion of the high effort grants below reward grants. Do you have anything within your experience that you can speak to the benefit of that?
Yeah, I think it comes down to dollars and cents a lot of the time, where, we've all seen those applications where some of them are like a postcard. You send it in and you get like 25 to 50,000 coming back, which is excellent.
Yes.
Usually those kind of applications have a high level of trust between the funder and the organization, a relationship where, they don't want to make the organization jump through hoops. And additionally, I will say funders, especially some of the more progressive funders, have been really mindful of trying to limit the application size. Even as recently as 5-6 years ago, there were a lot of applications that were like essay upon essay upon essay for just part one of the application.
Yes.
So I think a lot of that really comes down to, is the juice worth the squeeze? So if there's a 10-part application where you need to print out 10 different copies of each, mail it out to the funder, but you're only getting $5,000 out of it, that might be something you leave on the chopping block next time, where it's taking a ton of staff hours, a ton of resources, just a ton of administrative hoops to jump through. That's where I think it kind of comes down to it. So really looking at the money that would be coming back from a grant, and then just the amount of time and effort it would take to put that proposal together are usually the top two indicators I look at for determining if a grant is worth my time or not.
That's really good. And so that brings us to this point where it's really important for you also as nonprofits to be able to take a look at your strategic plan. Oftentimes we take a look at the strategic plan just to make sure we're doing things right, but also, as Anthony just pointed out in his experience, taking a look at that strategic plan can also be that make or break or that go no-go decision, right, that you've learned about thus far in terms of whether or not to go after a grant if it's worth the juice from the squeeze, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
I love that. So we will continue to let you reflect on these moments and these questions as we talked about specifically which OPAs are you already using that are effective for your grant strategy, as well as what grant performance metrics are you currently tracking so that you can bring those back in for your check-in moments. And lastly, make sure you're reflecting and documenting whether or not there are any high-effort grants that you've already gone after that have low reward, but they may be worth considering, as me and Anthony have talked about throughout this discussion. So we look forward to joining you along on this journey further in the future presentations.